Be mindful of the loops and the redundancy. You will repeat the same lesson with different scenarios and different people until you get it. Pay attention to what is the same through each iteration, and it will point to the objective. Then you will see the lesson displayed right before you. This is usually accompanied with a laugh and a duh. Initially, you're being taught how you are being taught, and not what you seek. That comes when you get the learning process down and you trust your experience and become more comfortable with how it works. Then you can relax and the prerequisite lessons pass by faster and faster. Then, when the time is right for you, on is visited on you because you have simply cleared away the perceptual barriers, and it will seem as though on was there right in front of you all the time. We are here to learn, and it is no surprise to ancient people that we are here going through what we are going through. Consciousness, you, me, everybody, is testing things through experience. It is one thing to know and quite another to experience it firsthand. We exist in a reduced energy state where the host-parasite, master-slave, creditor-debtor paradigm is being explored. Best way to learn that slavery is not a good idea is to experience what it's like to be a slave. We are also exploring confusion and insanity and learning how to return from a state of insanity or confusion. The following is a nuance of confusion and its principal characteristic. The confused are the last to know they're confused. If they did know they were confused, they would immediately work to remedy it. That's another nuance. Confusion cannot be remedied through working or effort. The main method is to stop and allow it to be fixed automatically. Stop thinking and allow your mind to change. That's not as easy as you think it is. Regaining sanity. Natural law is the only means to alleviate both the insanity and the confusion that causes this insanity. It is because on enforces natural law, and on will not force anything against your will. And I already know what you're thinking. Yeah, right. For an understanding of natural law, we must begin with the components of what you truly are. We are consciousness, and consciousness itself is split into two components. We are an individual, compartmentalized observational facet of on. Your life is on, experiencing consciousness through a limited tool. It is not possible for on to fully be expressed through one flesh suit. It would take more life than the universe can hold. We each do our job to capture specific experience for on. Ego is the physical expression of this limited facet of on. It is the perceived universe simulation you find yourself in. It is duality, or the illusion of others. It is all your thoughts, all your feelings, all actions, and all events. Even the perception of time and volume is merely ego. The interface for this aspect is the left brain. In the repression process, ego's other function, ego acts as a defense mechanism. The ego represses or hides uncomfortable experience to protect that which observes from the harshness of it. These memories often become buried under others. The ego refuses to even remember the existence of experiential memories and renders them invisible to the observer. Thus, the observer is unable to process the negative life experience for the positive purposes for which they were intended and manifested by the self. The apparent paradox of ego, serving as both inflictor of pain and protector, is solved by realizing that the ego has no real substantive existence of its own. The past is a construct of learned patterns. There is nothing real to protect. As there is no real enemy and no real death. Thus, ego places its own survival at the highest priority, for the discovery of the benign nature of existence would strip it of its power and potentially its function. And through multiplicity of projected enemies, ego is capable of projecting very intense, realistic hell experiences for the observer for learning purposes. Self, mentioned before, is the spiritual or energetic aspect or construct of our consciousness. Self is unity or oneness. Where ego has identity and quantity in the universe, the self is the part of us that is outside of the physical. It lives through the right brain. It governs the inspirational conduit through which our consciousness gains access to the mind of On. Through self, all reason is known when it is needed by ego, not when it is wanted by ego. Ego communicates in labels or definitions that require physicality to exist. Self communicates in symbols that have meaning and purpose that transcends the physical. It is helpful to look at it like a video game where one side sets up the game that the other side is playing. Ego lacks the senses or logic to cognitively understand or detect the self. Our challenges have to do with the age we are in. On created this duality, and then disconnected us from self to experience what it feels like to be separated from On. It was also to experience what it's like to have a beginning or an end that does not exist in unity. In self, we are one in eternity. This requires a rather limited sense of time. This is the Iron Age, and the ancients knew we would enter this period of extreme left-brain ego. This, however, is changing. This is why you are here right now. We put ourselves to sleep, or played a practical joke on ourselves. And now it's time to wake up and reveal the hidden camera. All is cyclical. When you look in the mirror, all that you see and experience in the physical is ego. On is the observer indicated by quantum mechanics, not the ego. Ego does the intending. But ego does not control the game, and it is not what collapses the life waveform into a particle we know of as now. Self is the element determining the position and timing of the resultant particle. The quantum physicist looks in the mirror and thinks the image is the observer, so therefore ego fools itself into thinking that it is what is controlling, when really, ego is merely the actor, and the director, or self, tells the actor what to do. This is the error that causes the primary failure in the law of attraction teachings. Another primary quantum effect is that it has been measured that often effects precede their cause. This is important, as this is the primary mechanism that allows ego to think that it is in control. The will to do something is projected in ego's time illusion such that the will appears to precede the action. This makes ego an excellent tool for learning, as all things appear spontaneous when actually they are under strict control of self, in complete safety. Natural law is the means by which all things occur, and is structured to provide this lesson. The reason I bring this up is because ego will compromise endlessly to maintain the illusion of it being in control. At this time, people are throwing off the existing ruse in large numbers, and ego is panicking and keeping pace, maintaining the illusions, as that is one of its primary functions. It is the deceiver, the illusionist, and allows us to exist in apparent separateness. Our lesson required a subtle change from the last age to allow us to explore and learn within this new paradigm. We lacked useful knowledge of what insanity is. This effectively removed the primary barrier to suffering, because when one has useful knowledge of insanity, then they can avoid suffering. We are affirming principles in natural law, using established precedent or a verdict employing trial by combat. When either method is used, someone suffers. To know the effect of going wrong, someone is required to go first and take one for the team. Our insanity is so deep that often we are required to do it over and over, and each time expecting a different result. Natural law is consistent. A more useful definition of insanity is the inability to perceive the truth. In truth, I mean On. If we have this specific blinder, then we do not know that what we are about to do will either produce benefit or it will produce suffering. If we pay attention and accept the suffering as necessary and are responsible for any action that produces suffering, then we'll be able to learn the lesson that suffering teaches and avoid it. If we do not pay attention to what occurs, or do not accept what we see, the truth, or we do not take responsibility for our actions, then we get the lesson again, and the suffering is increased. An increased consciousness is increased attention, increased acceptance, and increased responsibility. And this permits the learning of lessons without the negative reinforcement of significant suffering. The primary elements of insanity are indulgence of fiction and giving that which exists only in our minds power. A lack of constructive responsibility, in that we fail to respond, unresponsive, or our response is not appropriate, irresponsibility. Disconnection from unity, and ignorance of natural law. You cannot master insanity without first experiencing insanity. It is an illusion that hurts like hell. You need to forgive yourself for being insane because this was your objective and it is necessary. Cut yourself some slack. If you can't forgive yourself, then none of the perceived others in your experience can forgive you either. It is up to you. No need to keep score. If you think your life is a race or a fashion show, then you are merely distracting yourself from your own confusion. Responsibility is the key to the deprivation of rights. The insane have no rights, because the exercise of rights requires responsibility. The insane are incompetent, and the sane have a responsibility to care and treat the insane. Courts and governments presume us in our base state as being insane, without a sense of responsibility and without rights, unless we can demonstrate we are not insane. The trouble is, we continue to believe fiction is real. We are ignorant of the natural law, and we do not know how we do this to ourselves. Therefore, the world has become an insane asylum, where the insane are treated by others, who are themselves insane. The final attempt to remedy our insanity will be that we will be tortured until we either snap out of it or we die. Look around, and welcome to the modern age. One must truly want their state to change before they can even learn natural law pertaining to contracts. One must be willing to take responsibility for their lives before they even require the law. The insane are lawless by design. For me, the study of natural law contract was pivotal. In order to enter into contract, one must be competent and therefore responsible. The contract itself contains many of the elements, as you will see later. The means of communicating the process of escape. Left brain, ego, communicates in written and spoken words, and this is why descriptions about existing in right brain self are difficult, because we lack the language to describe it. In reality, the lack of context requires one to describe the right brain paradigm not as what it is, but rather what it is not. Similarly, to enter the right paradigm, one does not do something, think something, feel something. Rather, it requires a non-doing, non-thinking, and non-feeling. This is a passive act of repression by the ego. To say it another way, you cannot find the door out. You must stop and wait for the door to find you. Another way to understand it is that the self produces the egoic structure of the door and the left brain key. It takes a self to turn the key and open the door. Once outside the door, the key and the door are meaningless. The left brain paradigm is as a room, a containment, that one leaves rather than the transition being an entering into anything. Since the ego hates not being in control, calming it to a point where one is able to practice the appropriate non-action usually is quite difficult, if not impossible.